It is the year 1934. Adolf Hitler is consolidating his power in Germany, one of the strongest states in Europe. After years of chaos and humiliation, hopes for a strong, stable, and proud nation are rekindled among many Germans. Few yet realize that this moment marks the beginning of an immense tragedy that will engulf Europe, claim tens of millions of lives, devastate the continent, and scar it for generations. To understand how this came to pass, one must look back to the years following the First World War. After the collapse of the German Empire, the Weimar Republic is established, a state burdened with severe restrictions imposed by the victorious powers. The Treaty of Versailles severely limits Germany's economic and military development. The country is forbidden from maintaining an army larger than 100,000 soldiers, as well as possessing tanks, an air force, or a modern navy. Germany is left shattered. It loses approximately 13% of its European territory, is burdened with enormous war reparations, and is declared solely responsible for the outbreak of the war. In 1918, power is taken over by a government dominated by Social Democrats, led by Friedrich Ebert. This becomes the first democratic government of post-war Germany. Despite this, the country remains engulfed in chaos. On one side, radical left-wing movements demand revolutionary change, while on the other, embittered monarchists and former soldiers struggle to accept defeat, capitulation, and the growing poverty within the nation. From its very beginning, the young and inexperienced Weimar Republic is plagued by deep political and social crises. Adding to this, the ongoing economic crisis created the perfect conditions for all kinds of extreme ideas. At this moment, a young Austrian, Adolf Hitler, appeared on the scene. Hitler felt misunderstood by society. He was a young man who had just returned from the war and could not accept the new situation. At this time, his way of thinking also developed. He promised people jobs, food, and, most importantly, to restore the pride of the German nation. He blamed Marxists, left-wing groups, and Jews, who, according to Nazi propaganda, were responsible for the country's problems and for taking advantage of the German people. Many Germans agreed with these ideas. Combined with his strong speaking skills, this allowed Hitler to gain the support of the people, and in just 4 years, increase the membership of the German Workers' Party from 50 to 55,000. Still, the National Socialist German Workers' Party was very small compared to the whole country, but this was about to change. It was the year 1923. Germany was suffering from hyperinflation. The economy was in crisis, and people were desperate. Inspired by Mussolini, Hitler decided to try a coup in the heart of Bavaria, in Munich. In Bavaria, many people were nationalist and conservative, and did not trust the central government, which helped Hitler's plans. To succeed, he joined forces with other right-wing groups, like the Bavarian People's Committee and the Freikorps. The SA, Hitler's paramilitary group with a few hundred members, was also very important. On the 8th of November, Hitler and his supporters entered the Bürgerbräukeller, where a meeting of Bavarian politicians was taking place. They tried to negotiate, but it failed. Hitler realized that peaceful solutions would not work, so he and his followers tried to take key places in the city. Street fights broke out. Hitler hoped the army would support him, but he was wrong. The police and army stayed loyal to the Weimar Republic, and the coup failed. Hitler, who was in the fighting, was quickly caught and arrested. After the failed Munich Putsch in November of 1923, Hitler went on trial in Munich in 1924. He used the trial to speak to the public and gain support. With his speaking skills, he became well known in Germany as a patriot and defender of the nation's pride. After a short trial, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In prison, he wrote Mein Kampf and strengthened his ideas and plans for taking power in the future. The politician was released after 10 months, but he learned the most important lesson of his career so far. Power is not gained by force, but through a careful and well-planned strategy. This idea would define Adolf Hitler's entire future career. Immediately after his release, he began rebuilding the NSDAP. The party's structures were weakened, and the organization itself had been banned. It was necessary to find new members and to professionalize the party by creating a proper administrative structure. Hitler rebuilt the party mainly in Bavaria, focusing on discipline and strong organization within local branches. From the very beginning, his goal was to turn the NSDAP into a nationwide party, not just a local movement based in Munich. He was assisted in this process by Rudolf Hess, Ernst Röhm, Heinrich Himmler, and Gregor Strasser, as well as earlier by Dietrich Eckart, whose influence ended with his death in 1923. The SA also played an important role, providing protection at rallies and organizing demonstrations. The growth of the party was also made possible by financial support from wealthy industrialists. Hitler received money from figures such as Fritz Thyssen, Emil Kudorf, Hugo Stinnes, and later Alfred Hugenberg, who saw him as an ally in the fight against the left and against communism. Thanks to these funds, the party was able to organize rallies, print posters and pamphlets, and expand its organizational structures. In the following years, Hitler developed NSDAP propaganda, speaking in various German cities and gaining more and more supporters. The number of party members grew, though it was still small compared to the whole country. The Austrian fully realized that he needed a breakthrough, and it was about to come from across the Atlantic. In 1929, a stock market crash occurred in New York. The economy slowed for many years, and the crisis spread across the world. At that time, German industry was heavily dependent on American capital. When money stopped flowing, a chain reaction occurred. Banks began to fail, factories closed, and unemployment rose dramatically. Within a few years, over 6 million people lost their jobs. Society lost faith in democracy and in the Weimar Republic. During this time, Hitler devoted himself completely to political activity. He led the rebuilt NSDAP and consistently expanded its structures throughout the country. The party was divided into districts, each led by trusted people of Hitler, such as Gregor Strasser in northern Germany, or Joseph Goebbels in Berlin, responsible for propaganda. Goebbels quickly became one of the most important figures in the party, creating a modern propaganda system based on newspapers, posters, rallies, and radio. Hitler constantly traveled across Germany, giving speeches to workers, the unemployed, small business owners, and former soldiers. He promised jobs, order, and the restoration of national pride. At the same time, he identified enemies, blaming them for the crisis: Republican politicians, communists, and Jews. His simple language and emotional message appealed to more and more people. At the same time, the role of the SA, led by Ernst Röhm, grew. These units had hundreds of thousands of members and regularly clashed in the streets with the communist Rotfront. Violence became a daily reality in German cities, further weakening the authority of the state and reinforcing the Nazi message that only they could restore order. This had results. In the 1930 Reichstag elections, NSDAP received over 18% of the votes, becoming the second strongest political force in the country. It was a turning point. Hitler and his party were no longer seen as political outsiders and had become a real player on the German political scene. Still, power remained in the hands of weak centrist governments that could not cope with the crisis. In the following years, the situation worsened. Successive chancellors, such as Heinrich Brüning, Franz von Papen, and Kurt von Schleicher, ruled mainly through presidential decrees using the powers of Paul von Hindenburg. The parliament was paralyzed, and democracy increasingly lost its meaning. Political chaos favored extreme groups, especially communists and Nazis. Hitler took full advantage of the situation. He conducted intensive election campaigns, spoke across the country, and made his image omnipresent. NSDAP used modern propaganda methods, organized mass rallies, and exploited fear of communism. Meanwhile, SA units under Ernst Röhm regularly clashed in the streets with political opponents, deepening the sense of chaos and danger. In 1932, Hitler decided to aim for the highest office in the country and ran for president against Paul von Hindenburg. The confrontation ended in defeat for the Führer, but the 39% he received showed that Hitler had a real support base. He also proved this in the 1932 parliamentary elections, when NSDAP became the largest party in the Reichstag, gaining 37% of the votes. However, Hitler did not immediately become chancellor. President Paul von Hindenburg, an old Prussian general, did not trust Hitler and saw him as a dangerous radical. The politician's position was precarious. He lacked potential coalition partners, and the Weimar Republic was slowly recovering from the crisis. NSDAP's poll numbers began to fall, creating a dangerous situation for the Austrian. In this difficult time, Hitler was saved by his greatest adversary, Franz von Papen. Papen became chancellor after the extremely unpopular Heinrich Brüning. The new chancellor, to avoid ending like his predecessor, wanted to gain support in the Reichstag. Papen was the first to seriously court Hitler. He believed he could use him as a tool to gain popular support and then limit his influence. In July 1932, Papen lifted the ban on SA and SS activities, counting on Nazi support. After the next parliamentary elections, Papen lost the remaining support and was forced to step down. The new chancellor became Kurt von Schleicher, a general and political strategist. Schleicher tried to split NSDAP from within. He wanted to win over the moderate wing of the party, especially Gregor Strasser, offering him government positions. The plan almost succeeded, but Hitler quickly reacted, removing Strasser from the party leadership and maintaining NSDAP unity. Schleicher lost the trust of both Hitler and Hindenburg. At the same time, his government could not stabilize the economic or political situation. At this point, Franz von Papen returned, this time as the architect of the final agreement with Hitler. Papen began secret talks with Hitler, which took place, among other locations, at the residence of banker Kurt von Schroeder in Cologne. Conservative politicians, industrialists, and aristocrats also participated in these talks. The plan was simple, but fatally wrong. Hitler was to become chancellor, but the government would be dominated by conservatives. Papen expected that as vice-chancellor, he would effectively control power. Hindenburg hesitated for a long time, but was eventually convinced. He saw it as the only way to end chaos and stop the communists. On 30th January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. In his government, the Nazis held only a few key positions, including the Ministry of the Interior and the Ministry of Propaganda. But for Hitler, this was not enough. He wanted absolute power. The Reichstag fire presented a perfect opportunity to achieve it. The Nazis accused the communists of attempting a coup. This event allowed Hitler to get President Hindenburg to declare a state of emergency, which suspended basic civil rights such as freedom of speech, assembly, and the privacy of correspondence, making Hitler practically a dictator. In March 1933, the Reichstag passed the so-called Enabling Act, which allowed Hitler to issue laws without the parliament's approval. In practice, this meant the end of democracy in Germany. The chancellor became an almost unlimited ruler of the state. At the same time, the Nazis began eliminating opposition. Trade unions were dissolved. All political parties except NSDAP were banned, and the first concentration camp at Dachau received its first political prisoners. In June 1934, Hitler carried out the Night of the Long Knives, during which SS units murdered the leaders of the SA and other inconvenient politicians. This purge secured the SS a dominant position in the apparatus of terror, and the army publicly recognized Hitler as the legitimate leader. A few months later, on August 2nd, 1934, President Paul von Hindenburg died. Hitler immediately combined the offices of Chancellor and President into a single position. He declared himself Führer, leader of the German people, gaining full power. He now controlled the parliament, the administration, the military, and the courts. All state institutions were subordinated to his will, and political opposition was completely crushed.